As with all beginnings, a change took place, a shifting of states. This is Armillaria. She lives in total darkness. She is over 2,400 years old. She was born from a single spore, too small to be seen with a microscope. Her body consists of mycelium, a huge web of white fibres. Her rhizomorphic growth extends for over 3.6 miles. She is the largest living organism that ever existed, and she is beginning to dream.
We cast our eye to the soils and surfaces of the world. We see them as plastic, limited. Think little of the volume beneath, the darkness, unclassified by sight. Nowhere else is the gap between life and death so collapsed, so proximal. Here in this soup, where growth and decay share a blind face, in this black volume dwells Armillaria. Our mushroom, she grows in this darkness, nothing like the mushroom you see in your mind. She is all things but singular. She seeps and curls, clings to the back of root, and buries deep and widespread. She is pure light stretched thin in the darkness. She supports the blistering life of soil, breathes clear air, and drinks cool water, filtered clean through dusk from the surface. She is far beyond and behind us, and shows little trace of her existence, billowing in this darkness, like milk and ink. Each soft finger claws through the black, lucent, blooming like snowflakes. Your presence implicit, implicated. You are present and active. In fact, you play a larger part in your experience than anything you will see on this screen, your thoughts, born of sight. There is all the room in the world to envision her, and into this black your thoughts pour, are devoured. She is made in your image, alive inside all of those black moments. As your gaze enters this darkness, so too does it enter you. Your pupils agape, two black holes, forever yawning. You realize you are lying in an empty bathtub, still charged with latent heat. You realize you are a small stream in a wood, and there is someone above you, searching. It is September. They can smell you. You can smell them. It is cold.
Below the surface, the temperature remains a steady 12 degrees centigrade, as it has done for some millions of years. In the world above, there are signs of change that haven't gone unnoticed by our mushroom. Here, it is brisk. As autumn soaks into the soil, Armillaria begins to stir, rising from the depths. She bolts to the surface overnight, driven forth by each cell of her body, her every fibre singing towards the surface. Under the ground, she is Titan, and no life would flourish without her presence. Each ivory digit that enters the world shows nothing of her enormity. At the root of these fingers is a most curious thing, an object as black as the darkness from which it came. As she grows beyond these woods, she comes across objects left buried in the ground. Her perceptual experience is three-dimensional, but the stimulus she receives is clouded by the rapid growth of her mycelia. Armillaria lacks the sixth sense, that of proprioception, the sense that tells us where the mobile parts of our bodies are in relation to all the rest. Since she has become sentient, and cultivated the idea of her centre within these woods, she has begun to sacrifice her peripheral clarity. With focus comes blur. Each solid object she encounters, she feels as a void, a beguiling absence. Through a process of habituation, an internal image of each object is created in her perceptual system. And for Armillaria, these schema take the form of gloss-black replicas, made of fungal sugars, cradled in her mycelial centre. It looks very much as if our mushroom has succeeded in separating the world into the realms of the perceptual and the tangible. Albinism is a congenital condition characterized by the complete or partial absence of pigment from the skin. This pigment, melanin, protects us from the sun, and those with a lack of melanin suffer from a form of photophobia, the physical intolerance to light. As a symptom, photophobia is not a morbid fear, but an experience of discomfort or pain due to exposure to light. The term is sometimes additionally applied to the fear of light, such as heliophobia. In albinism, photophobia is a symptom of the condition, but in biology as a whole, photophobic behavior describes life forms who thrive without the need for sunlight, and whose lives are played out beneath the ground. We may not realize it, but fungi live all around us, and we're more closely related to fungi than any other kingdom of living things. The basic structure of fungi is rather peculiar. The fungal body consists mainly of threads called hyphae that search out and digest food. Hyphae grow very rapidly from a single spore, and as they branch out, a tangled mass called a mycelium is formed. The mushrooms we find growing in woods and on lawns are actually complex spore-making structures that arise from a large underground mycelium. The mycelium infuses all landscapes, holds soils together, and is extremely tenacious. It holds up to 30,000 times its own mass. They are the biomolecular disassemblers of Mother Nature. Mycelial threads are divided up into individual cells by porous walls that allow mitochondria and even nuclei to pass through them. whilst at the same time redistributing nutrients and information. Mycelia is a network that allows communication between fungi and the soil, trees and animals. It is the precursor to the internet. My father was a surgeon. Whilst at medical school, he would attach fly agaric mushrooms to his wrists with a bandage and spend all day in the picture theatre, watching the same films again and again. He told me of the profound effect of watching Patrick Keeler's Robinson in Space on what felt like a permanent loop. How film strips broke down into a frozen glut of still images trickling through his brain. He continued his experiments with Amanita muscaria for years into his professional career. He would come home from the cinema euphoric but exhausted, and as a child, my sister and I would spend hours sitting at his feet in the gloaming half-light that he demanded in those evenings, listening to his delirious ramblings as other children might listen to fairy tales or bedtime stories. Father was not a great fan of alcohol, for it reacted badly with his regular intake of fly agaric, but he referred to wine and beer as the great ethnogen of the Northern Europeans, and he would make great claims for its shamanistic possibilities. Often, if we walked together in the city, he would point out street drinkers and tramps as they jabbered and shouted. He would wonder out loud with which gods they were communicating, talking about the pantheism of the modern city, the great gods of the secular age and their true followers, the dispossessed, the down and outs, the drunks. Age. Accident. Cataract. Hold your thumb up in front of you at arm's length. Now, look at your thumbnail. The area that your nail covers is the same size as the central point of focus on the back wall of your eye. Everything else in your field of vision is blurred. The fovea centralis covers an area of about 1.5 millimeters on the retina. The fovea is responsible for sharp central vision, allowing us to do all the things where visual detail is of primary importance. These things, like reading, understanding images and recognizing faces, are the things that make us human. In evolutionary terms, it has been said that the fovea was the seed for human consciousness, allowing free will to break through into human behavior like a mushroom breaking the surface of the soil. As with all evolution, the development of the fovea started out as a random mutation, a mistake, but a mistake that has formed the basis of the way we see our world. Is it a coincidence that the term fovea comes from the Latin meaning pitfall or trap?
You mirror this scene. You choose a person sitting close by and observe them. Attune yourself to their presence. They're listening, my words in their ears. You become aware of their watching this, and of your watching them. You think of the crystal skull from the British Museum, the fake one. You sister this memory with a bad CGI, archaeological recreation. This is how she looked. Countless miles of fibre optic cable, bristling, sinewed, black. But this is after the skull, just dipped in a 3-litre can of gloss paint, emerges in slow motion. Before you, a real face, a warm cheek, a life. You are granted a knowing, an image, an idea that if defined appears impossible. You see inside her eye, but your view is further back, wider than any view you may be granted by any lens. Where you would expect to find the fleshy walls of the inner eye that blend into what we call the retina, you find what looks like polished obsidian, black and smooth and wet, like a pool ball in a pint glass. As you move toward the retina, you become aware of a field of crystalline rods and cones, multiple, like some great glacier, the inside of some imagined planet. Resting dead center, the very fovea we are told is the size of a thumbnail at arm's length is in fact a polished concave mirror, quietly, imperceptibly, reflecting the world beyond the eye, to no one. You remember the thing you were unsure of, the thing you named ball or sphere, that hummed and flickered in the palm. But you forget the small hands cradling the thing. Once gone, you have no other thing by which to understand the scale of this thing. It expands to the size of a planet, and then at a volume, at the very edge of your comprehension, you zoom out forever until the thing the size of a planet is 1 pixel wide, now gone. You feel a cold breeze lick the back of your neck and forget what just happened. Then you see, sweating and heaving in the darkness, a golden man, gossamer and molten.
In one of my own investigations, I created a box that could make solid objects appear to fade away softly and silently, like puffs of smoke in the wind or banks of fog dissolving in a hot sun. The children referred to this device as an Ocelli or little eye. They were not the least afraid of the box and were quite happy to climb in and out of it. They knew that solid objects do not dissolve like puffs of smoke. Children acquire this knowledge towards the end of the first year of life. At this point, and by some mysterious process, the child begins to use her perceptual system rather than being used by it. Faced with the Ocelli, young babies seemed to accept that the objects in question were gone. By the age of 1, this acceptance of visual input was over. The babies crawled up to the box, banged it, peered around it, and then around the rest of the room until they found the object that had disappeared, at which point they would glare at me, expressing wordlessly the feeling of triumph they were experiencing. Much adult thought is about unseen and unseeable entities. In time, we rely less and less on what we can see to explain what we are seeing. Any mental system that kept perception in the dominant position that it occupies in childhood will be quite incapable of coping with these fictive entities. The development away from perceptual preeminence seems universal, occurring in all cultures at all times. It has been argued that we would be happier and healthier if we stayed closer to the world of our senses. That might be so, but there is no way we shall ever know. We explain our world in terms of unseeable, imperceptible events and forces, and yet our perceptual world, the source of all we know, still conditions and shapes the way we think. As we get older, we grow away from the perceptual world. But the more we grow away from the perceptual world, the more we are compelled to return to the primitive certainties of perception. Our mushroom's journey has only just begun. Perhaps she will take a different path.
Yelelo, yelelo. wesu, don't want to la la, mulong where I let go.